Good morning and welcome to another videocast from Hendy Consulting, the specialist management consulting firm to the $125 billion FPD display market. And today I'd like to talk about the role of the equipment industry in enabling fundamentally new displays to bring to the marketplace, and the synergistic relationship between the equipment industry then and typically SDC, but it could be LGD, in developing fundamentally new value propositions for the display marketplace. I want to talk about a few of the innovations and a few of the key players that have ended up then with large market share positions in their respective pieces of equipment. And that does tend to be the deal, that if you do actually pull off something really fundamentally innovative and new that enables a display ecosystem, then typically that equipment player tends to own that marketplace and have a dominant market share in the marketplace thereafter. Not always the case, but quite often. So the first one we want to talk is just about the OLED wave in particular, and Flex OLED specifically. And this was a 10-year project, or more than 10-year project, by SDC to get to the point where the displays are actually not flexible in use in this case, but they're actually on a polyimide substrate with the substrate bent around so the drivers are on the back. For better form factor for Samsung and Apple phones. And there are a huge number of beneficiaries out of OLED in general, including Toki for the fine metal mask process, as we'll discuss. But then there's the material players that provided the polyimide materials, what's called colorless polyimide, even though it isn't colorless, and then the equipment players that then were involved around this. So the fine metal mask process for the OLED evaporation, the TFE process on top, which replaces one glass with a 1.5 diad TFE process, and laser liftoff and PI coat and cure as being sort of other interesting innovations. We're also going to talk about the laser anneal that's involved in forming the LTPS transistors that basically are a basis for modern smartphone OLEDs. So yes, the first one to talk about is fine metal mask evaporation, and really the key beneficiary out of this has been Canon Toki, and the whole industry, Gen 6 in particular, revolves around slots that they have for equipment for Gen 6. The TFE process then is a replacement for the glass and was brought about by two companies working not together but alongside each other to provide the inorganic layer by PECVD and the organic layer by inkjet printing. So that's Applied Materials and Cativa, that is basically now the industry solution for TFE to replace the top glass in an OLED display. Other than that, then of course you need LTPS today to pull off Flex OLED, and key processes in that include excimer laser anneal. There are doping and ion implantation are also important, but I think in terms of a critical process step, people would typically talk to ELA, and AP Systems in Korea is one of the key beneficiaries, working with Samsung for lasers for the ELA process as part of LTPS. Similarly, if you want to do the polyamide spin and cure, then there is some equipment, and my feeling is this is a simpler process, but you then have specialists in coating but also then curing and the associated laser liftoff process that enable this to happen to do Flex OLED. So the second case example I want to talk about is the Samsung SDC QD OLED product, for which an architecture is shown here, and it truly is an amazing display. I've got one at home and I'm amazed by it. And the key innovation here is the use of inkjet printing now on a pixel basis to do the RG and then the overcoat dots for the front plane, and now it's not just using an inkjet printer to provide a specialist fine film, it's actually doing pixelated printing. And so that was the key innovation step in this, beyond also then the equipment that does open evaporation of the, as you can see here, the multi-layer stack that Samsung is using. That's also going to get some innovation later when UDC comes out with its new blue phosphorescent OLED that should bring down the number of layers in that stack quite substantially. So who are the winners in this space? Clearly this sort of technology, as with white OLED, is an open evaporation system. In the Samsung case, I think it is working in collaboration with Toki although YAS has worked with and LG PRI have worked with LG on the white OLED solution. The other key equipment innovation that needs to be used is pixel printing, inkjet print, and here you have Cativa and Semes as the key two players that benefited in business in doing the front plane for QD-OLED. Now we move on one more, and we move on and talk about micro LED. And for micro LED, there's actually probably multiple areas where equipment innovation was needed, and it's certainly been the area in which over the last 5 years I've probably seen the most change. Also, you had players coming out of the semiconductor industry and out of the LED industry into the micro LED space, and also from the pick and place component industry into the micro LED display space. And what it's actually given is diversity of players, which is absolutely fascinating, to provide for micro LED displays that could be the Apple Ultra Watch due out at the end of 24, beginning of 2025, and the Samsung The Wall, which is in market already but is broadly used as a signage now. But when it reaches consumer price points, which I believe it will do eventually, then it will be it'll be a high-end but mainstream consumer television. And from an equipment point of view, it's actually quite a few areas where the equipment is phenomenal, and this is really only a selected 3 areas, and even within that I've selected players particularly. So if you talk about the reactors for making the fundamental micro LEDs in the first place, then Aixtron and Veeco have differentially different positions depending on exactly what type of wafer you're doing, and whether you're also trying to do a 8-inch InGaN solution, for example, or a 6-inch Allen gap process. They have slightly different market positions. In the mass transfer equipment, the darling child for the moment is the laser transfer process, although I still think there's some flux going back and forth. A little while ago, it was the Toray Engineerings of this world that seemed to have the upper hand in sort of physical mass transfer. Now I think Samsung is using a range of different processes, or at least that's the rumour, for doing the mass transfer. And then in this whole world, what you want to do is to know that the micro LEDs, before you transfer them, and actually potentially after you transfer them, light up in the right way. And so electroluminescent test tools are actually a very important part of the total solution for micro LED. And so this one is a picture of a tool from my friends at Inziv in Israel, but there are 3 players already tackling that space, including Inziv, Tomp Engineering, and NanoX, who are going after that space. So it is clear that equipment is a key integral part of innovation in the display industry. And what I also want to argue is the players that help pull off the leading performance do tend to then be rewarded with dominant market share. So my summary, the equipment industry is a critical part of display innovation, and you can actually argue that it is this ability to work with the equipment industry to develop new concepts that defines the leadership of the display industry. So I would argue Samsung, SDC and LGD are at the top of the industry, and one of the reasons for them being there is this ability to fundamentally develop new equipment. It takes an understanding of novel things at a new level, and I don't really see that capability in the other players, and I think this is one of the things that will keep the Koreans at the top of the game. Typically, the player that helps SDC pull off a new technology tends to be rewarded with dominant market shares. Basically, what works for Samsung, everybody else will adopt. So there, while you have to fund the technology yourself all the way through until it finally getting into market, and in a way you could say that the display players are a little bit selfish. They are very, very rarely will sort of pre-fund any sort of development on a tool. You have to do it all yourself and bring it to them, and then if it works, then maybe you get the benefits of all that work. And finally, the final point is I actually think the equipment industry for displays is at a sort of fundamental flex point right now, where you've got fragmentation and fundamentally new players coming in from semiconductors, the LED space, and component pick and place, particularly for micro LED. And what's fascinating there, I think the more of the bigger mainstream equipment players should be actually looking at M&A strategies right now to pick up pieces that give them new competencies to play within a micro LED world. So just a little bit for background on the role of Hendy Consulting in working with clients. And I think I wanted to make the distinction here between market research companies, of which I would say there are arguably three for the display world that I actually say are world-class. Omdia is the first, DSEC and Ross Young is the second. And then I would argue for Mini-LED and Micro-LED, Yole is probably a third player, and any one of those three players is really world class in providing information around market sizing, pricing, trends, and capacity investment. So if all of those of your questions, like how big is the smartphone OLED market, or what is the pricing today for a 55-inch LCD TV, or what are the trends in foldable displays in terms of design-in wins, materials, architectures, and those sort of things, and which fabs will be built, then that's when you turn to the market research industry. Where we sit is we're management consultants to the display business, and so the level of questions is just simply different. So we typically get asked, is this technology any good, be it either a material or a tool? And it's the question then of making an assessment with a professional opinion on where it should fit and how much one should pay for it. Another question we get typically involved in is how to set up a JDA with the display industry, or a collaboration, or a co-investment, or looking at factory investments or partnerships in the display world. And so I would just argue that these are higher level questions, and that is fundamentally the difference between the two businesses. And that's one of the reasons why you would choose to work with us, and in which case we may be able to be relying on data from the market research base to form decisions that work at this higher level. So again, management consulting works on the level of, well, should I build this new fab? How should I build it? How do I mitigate risk? How big should it be? And when should I build it over time? And how can I make it economically successful? Those sort of questions are definitely answered at that level. And the meta questions like, how can I position my business for success? We work with a lot of pre-revenue startups, and they're typically, when they have cash one time over and they have to get it right, making sure they have a plan that they really believe in with a partnering set and an ecosystem that they believe in is a critical part of management consulting for displays. And we have worked across a very large number of types of assignment and types of domain within the display space. So it is a $125 billion industry, but I would argue we've worked for a very large portion of it, including quite a few of the niches. So this is fundamentally the role of management consulting versus market research. And I would very strongly recommend the three market research companies. If that's the level of your question, which is about how big is the marketplace, where is it moving, how is it priced, who are the players, then that's the best way is for anyone would be to go out and buy third-party market research, because it's the most cost-effective by far. But if you're asking a different level of question, which is my technology any good? How do I take it forward? Who should I partner with? What would be the best way to work with semi-finished goods within the display arena to pull off my display technology? Should I build a factory for an investment within a display ecosystem? How should I do so, and how should I mitigate risk? Those are all questions then that we would help answer. Anyway, I hope that's clear, and I hope you have a very good day. Bye-bye.